Hello, my name's Glen, and this is Dave.
Hi, yes, I am Dave. I can confirm this. Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
And today, really, we want to talk to you about an idea of putting AI front and center in a mainstream TV campaign. I work on the Original Source brand, which is part of PZ Cussons across our shower portfolio. And we came up with a problem for the brand that we needed solving. And it led to conversations with Fold7, our main communications agency, to think through how we go about doing that. What we're going to do first is show you the output, and then we'll talk to you about the input that led into it and the learnings that we had.
Supercharge your day with the 100% natural fragrance of Original Source. Original Source. Nature hits different.
So as you can see, the output was a really tight 30-second TV commercial. But what we were really impressed with is we didn't expect that that's what we would come out with when we started the process. And that process started with a business problem. The problem was, how do we drive salience for this brand? We recognized that we need to drive more penetration in order to grow, and we want to disrupt and be culturally relevant as we did so to get younger consumers, so 25-year-olds as a bullseye, across an 18 to 44 broader target audience, so that we could start to get them thinking about the fact that Original Source use 100% natural fragrance to drive refreshment, something hopefully in this weather we all need. What we saw is that there was lots of insight that would help us to get us there, and we wanted consumers to end up with the idea that Original Source isn't like other shower gels. We don't use synthetic ingredients, and we approach market in a different way so that they think of Original Source as something different and better than others. We did a lot of consumer work, spoke to a lot of consumers, and came up with some very simple insights around, firstly, the fact that consumers are just generally weary. They're tired, they've got busy lives, they're emotively tired, and they're mentally tired. And we see this through different sources, through what we hear in consumer groups, through what we see in quant research, and also what we see on online search. This is just an example of Google search terms, and you can see that tiredness kind of increasing over time. And the other observation was that within the washing and bathing category, nature's often presented as gentle and worthy, and it's quite dull. And we think differently. So nature isn't like that in the real world. Nature's full of vitality, it's full of bold colors. You know, chop a watermelon in half, go outdoors today in this heat, and you'll see nature in all its glory. And we wanted to bring that to the market and disrupt the market by really kind of heroing nature as we went. So the opportunity as we saw it was knowing that we had this kind of refreshing benefit that drove energy and really kind of heroing that benefit of the energy that we could drive, and starting to challenge the market to want more from their shower gel and their morning shower than they traditionally get. And in terms of then how that came to life, or ever awkward as a client, we said, but we need the communication to do more. We're very conscious that over the past, we just focused on our mint products, which is a really important part of our range. It's nationally understood as the minty one, the one that gives you that tingle and a bit of a feeling. But we wanted to mean more than that. And we wanted to bring the rest of the range to life, our rainbow of different fragrances. So we wanted to move from just kind of mint only to the full range. We wanted to move from that product-centered benefit of the tingle into an actual overall energy benefit. And we wanted to get out of the bathroom. So many ads in washing and bathing start and end in a bathroom. When we're talking about nature, the opportunity is to get out into that space. So actually allowing us to kind of get out of just that rigid area in the bathroom. And the other thing that we'd noticed is some of our tone of voice had become quite cheeky, but we wanted it to become more disruptive. So to be more culturally relevant, to actually drive that tone of voice as we went. So we're very clear in terms of what we learned. There was a category norm, which was around kind of gentle and worthiness of nature. There was a human need, which was about tiredness and lack of energy. And there was a brand truth that could answer that, which was about 100% natural fragrance to drive refreshment. And I'll hand over to Dave to talk about how then we led that brief into the work that was created.
Thanks, Alex. So, yeah, this is the idea in a line. It's nature hits different. And this is not the nature of sort of beige gentleness, cornfields and soft dew on leaves. This is visceral stuff. So the idea that this is a jolt of energy from nature that gets you sort of like, releases you from the tiredness and sort of gets you into the world every day. And getting to this strategy, actually, you know, this is, we're going to talk about AI in a minute, but this is very much not an automated process. This is very much about human labor. It's about rock solid foundations for this strategy, and then its creative expression in the form of nature hits different. So, in terms of sort of executing this, we needed to not look like the rest of the category. We didn't want to look soft and gentle and beige. You know, if we're expressing this idea of nature as an energy source, you know, we needed something that was colorful, that's invigorating, and crucially actually sort of looked a little bit like the content that our audience actually consumes in sort of social and digital channels. So yes, we were looking to basically dramatize this sort of burst of colorful, invigorating energy. Now, quite early on, you know, the story, as you've seen, you know, spoiler alert, you've already seen the ad, but it's a very simple story. It's a very simple proposition strategically, but it's also a very simple execution, which is someone that's tired, gets in the shower, has their original source, and is then carried on this sort of wave of energy to work. There's a bunch of ways you could have done this. With all the time and money in the world, you could probably have had wire work, and you could shot it over a number of days, and it would look a little bit like the thing on the right there. But actually, this is where we started thinking about AI. So it was very much driven by execution, by script, because what we were seeing out in the world were lots of interesting digital creators making quite fun transition-based videos like the one on the left here, you know, sort of from their holiday destinations and whatnot. And they were a little bit shonky and a little bit internet-y and very much sort of AI generated. But we liked the aesthetic of this and thought, actually, that feels about right for what we're trying to describe. It's colorful, it's digitally native, and crucially, it looks like the sort of content that our audience is consuming already. So we thought, I wonder if we can use AI to bring this idea to life. And here, you can see many, 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 many style frames. I mean, a feast for the senses. And really, these days, what you'll find is actually, you know, as you'll all be experienced with, AI is used a lot in sort of visualization now in any sort of production process, whether it's traditional sort of live action shooting or CG. Often a director will use style frames, mid-journey, things like that, to sort of like start to world build so that before we actually get into production, everyone knows what we're aiming for. Interestingly here, these style frames were going to end up in the final ad. So it's a little bit more jeopardy in terms of what you're agreeing to and what you're signing up to. But the other thing we thought was, you know, AI is incredible at generating mind-blowing visuals, not necessarily very precisely, but very quickly. And we thought, what if this journey wasn't just one sensory journey through one world, but actually what if we could kind of blow out all the different fragrances, if you like, of original source and have this person travel from the shower through all sorts of different sensory worlds. So at one point we were looking at lemons and coconuts and windsurfing on raspberry seas, riding a mint horse, all sorts of things. You know, we went pretty wild to start with. But these are the style frames with which it all began. Now, we are here to talk about, you know, an AI production, but actually it's not really. This is, I think the reason that it's successful and has worked well is because it's actually a really pure hybrid production in the sense that, yes, AI has a massive role in it and generated the kind of middle 70% of the ad, but actually it's live action at the top and tail of the ad. And that's because we wanted a degree of control. Now, since we made this, we've had the rise of things like Google VO3, and obviously the technology keeps changing. But when we made this, we thought, well, look, we're not going to just sort of like, you know, press the button and hope for the best. We need a degree of control, particularly over the sort of performance elements, so the comedy performance at the top and tail of the ad, but also where he interacts with the product, which is fairly important. We didn't want to leave that in the hands of AI. So this is very much a hybrid production, live action, AI generated in the middle, and a hell of a lot of human endeavor just to make sure that all those outputs were sort of working and not being too wonky. You want the good wonky in AI, but not necessarily the wonky that it sometimes wants to produce. Nonetheless, any AI-based production process is a bit of a leap of faith. And I remember talking to Alex and the team about, you know, really they were saying, can we rely on AI to produce this commercial to a kind of level of dynamism and premiumness that we require? And so some of these early gifts were like sort of saying, well, yeah, we think we can, but there is gonna still be a bit of a leap of faith required. And you can see, you know, not a million miles from where we ended up, but the guy looks a little bit more like me actually than the guy that's in the final commercial. It's not deliberate. But we managed to kind of sell the guys on sort of getting into bed with AI, and this is where the journey started. So this rather disappointing storyboard shows you that, we are in a world that's still a little bit sort of traditional. We've got sort of, standard shooting board, storyboard for the top and the tail of the ad, where our chap walks into the shower, receives his sort of burst of energy from nature. And then we've got the kind of 4 sensory worlds, the 4 style frames that we landed on for that journey in the middle, which is going to be AI generated. And at the end, he arrives in the office, he's reinvigorated, we see the pack shots, and that's the end. So really, so much of this is still very much sort of within our control, very much based on sort of traditional methods. And this glamorous set of photos is from the shoot itself. We go to all the really exotic locations for this stuff. But you can see it's a corner of a studio somewhere in London, and this poor chap has a shower cubicle in the corner of a corner. And this is where we shot the live action segments. Now, interestingly, you're always going to have to do this anyway, but what we're doing additionally, as well as capturing sort of his performance for the beginning and the end of the commercial, is that we're overshooting to basically capture lots and lots of variants of his expression, because we're going to need to use that to train AI for the central portion of the commercial. Now, this is the next bit. This is quite a big bit. Effectively, we've got our style frames, as you've already seen. And what we're asking AI to do is animate those style frames and also, crucially, transition between each one. AI is brilliant at transition because it's not held back by physics. So let alone what you could do in CG or sort of live action, it can just completely reimagine how things can get from one state to the next. So it's rather brilliant at that. What it's not necessarily good at is consistency. So every time you get something you like in terms of a transition, you might also get some artifacts that you don't like, in which case you've got to regenerate a little bit, and then you might get even more anomalies. So at this point, we've got a lot of human input as well. So we've got VFX artists, we're using everything from sort of Flame to Photoshop and other tools really kind of smooth out those anomalies in what AI is producing. So that's the technical bit of it. But actually, the other bit of it, the very other human element, is actually how tight the team needs to be, sort of agency and client, because this isn't like where you see an edit and then you go off for 2 weeks, then you present a little bit of post, and then it's quite a kind of slow process, that in a sort of traditional world. But it's almost daily sort of interactions with the client, agreeing and really sort of netting out on what is the kind of combined feedback. How do we make that as tight as possible so we're not giving the AI too much room for maneuver? You want it to sort of dream big, but you don't want it to derail the process. So a lot of iterations, and what the production company, the very brilliant Private Island, shout out to them, called a buttload of cleanup. So yeah, the other bit of this, of course, is getting from the live action elements into the AI elements. Now, this is interesting because when you're shooting these, you obviously haven't made the AI gen bits yet. And here's just an example, a couple of bloopers. You can see some weirdness going on here where the AI is having a bit of a sort of fever dream. Let me see if I can play those again for you. But yeah, here we go. All sorts of wonkiness going on there that we didn't need. So just examples of things that we needed to clean up as we went and smooth out, because it gets uncanny very, very quickly. So I'd love to say, and Meta would like to have you believe, that it's as simple as pushing a button, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, and off we go, your ad is generated. But actually, this is an intensely human process still. I would always argue that actually, AI is only as good as the inputs you give it, and I still think that humans are best for those inputs. Strategically, creative platform, that thinking needs to be robust. It needs to work. And then it can do its magic. But then, of course, where humans come back in is the matter of taste, which AI has not yet replicated. So judging whether those outputs work, is this what you require? Does this meet the criteria that you have set? So an intensely human process, machine efficiency meets human creativity, and we're pretty excited with the results.
And then from there, we're also very conscious that Fold 7 had put all of this work into what we felt was great creative, and the risk was putting it in very dull media. So we worked with Wavemaker, who are our media agency, who came up with a strategy of high-octane media. And that was all about keeping the brand on the move, putting it in moments where consumers had low energy and moving that into high-energy outtake. So one of the things that focused the mind was the deadline. We decided to do a link up with Celebrity Bear Hunt, which is trending at #1 on Netflix for 3 weeks. that gave us a time pressure. And I think that's really important in terms of what Dave was saying about working with a tight team and making sure there's really good collaboration, because every day we had to be talking to make sure we're hitting those timelines. The output that they then developed was both the AI advertising plus more traditional use of outdoor onto bus wraps and T-sides across the nation and then into commuter stations. So really kind of moving the creative into kind of those high energy outtakes in low energy moments. And ultimately what we're interested in is the impact of it. So very quickly we went into System 1. We got a 5-star rating, which we're really pleased with. So it's the highest performing ad content on the brand that we've seen. We grew spontaneous awareness, which is the whole purpose of the brief around salience. And we also were really pleased that we got a 16% growth in our equity statement, which is it's different from other shower gels. Because again, all of this campaign, as you can tell by the tagline, is all about creating that difference and the fact that we use 100% natural fragrance. And then most importantly, in terms of how brands grow, we've seen the highest penetration in 4 years, and that's leading to our value sales growing by 4.5%. So all good news, but lots of learnings in there that Dave will wrap up with.
Yeah, a few key takeouts for us, which is, I said it before, but I think humans provide the best input into AI systems. I mean, AI is very good at looking at other outputs and producing outputs from outputs, but actually the best input here, I think, is solid strategic foundations, a really clean, creative idea. I think Gen AI needs to be aesthetically right for the idea, so I think being forced into sort of areas it shouldn't be, where the audience might not be, where they might not be familiar with that aesthetic, is not necessarily the right idea. So in this case, it was a sort of Goldilocks situation where the audience is existing, sort of seeing this sort of content, so it felt right. Understand the strengths and limitations of the tool. You're going to need lots of people still, not only in terms of sort of evaluating the outputs, but also just cleaning up those outputs. That whole thing of quick, concise collaboration and integrated feedback is absolutely crucial. This is very human intensive. Allow plenty of time for trial and error and clean up, plenty of that to be done. And as I said before, it's all about balancing that kind of thing that machines are brilliant at, efficiency, dreaming big, but crucially guided by human creativity. We've got like 1 minute, 39 seconds for questions if you have any, but otherwise that's us. Thank you very much.